What's up, summoners, and welcome back to another RiftGuides WildRift video. For today we are going to talk about the best solo queue champions for the current patch, and obviously you'll find a lot of champions you already know, but maybe a few you haven't been seeing so much lately. Nonetheless, they're absolutely broken, so you should have them on your radar. Anyways, let's talk about our question of the day. Who do you believe is an underrated champion right now? Let me know in the comments below. Given the current balance, Camille is an absolute demon in solo queue competitive play and just overall as a champion. Riot made this champion super easy to play while removing a lot of her skill ceiling. There's a lot of forgiving things, or are a lot of forgiving things when it comes to Camille, and it really shows. The play rate has been going up and the accessibility for just new players to picking up this champion has already risen quite a lot if you just take a look at solo queue. But let's talk about this champion's laning phase. The laning phase of Camille hasn't really changed that much if you think back to the past. She spams her second ability and then uses her first ability. For maxing during the laning phase, or generally as a champion, you want to max your second ability first and then your first ability, because you want the AD scaling and the conversion that again scales into levels to true damage as the game goes on. Your third ability is only a tool to get closer to the enemy, and nowadays you don't even lose anything. As long as you use a grace period after using the spell, you always get the attack speed anyway. And here are just a few things you can have on your mind that are really helpful when playing Camille. For example, when you play against a Renekton and he dashes into you, you can use the portrait lock feature and spam your first ability. So even if he stuns you, your first ability will go off, and therefore the auto attack empowerment, and therefore your passive ability will be triggered and the shielding will be gained. With the 20% bonus shield, you don't really lose too much HP and you'll be most of the time just fine. Another thing you have to understand when playing Camille is that you have a lot of opportunity to go for roaming plays when you're level 5. Given the wave state of your lane, you can basically just dip towards the middle lane and go for an easy play and kill the enemy mid laner. There's not much it takes, only a few button inputs by your ally and the enemy will be dead. And since mid lane is the most important tower in the game, it will really open up possibilities as the game goes on. For example, getting the tower below the threshold for the Herald execute. Other than this, just make sure to not lose too many minions and don't go for flippy dragon plays. That's basically it. The next champion that's also a solo queue demon is Lucian. I'm not necessarily talking about inherent champion strength, it's just about his kit. The problem with Lucian is that in the distant past he was such a level 2 ganker while clearing one buff and walking into a lane, and then people learned about this, but with the inflation in WildRift this thing happens again and again and again. People refuse to use wards or eyes and have any concept or understanding about how jungle pathing functions. But if there's something that really comes to mind when you're facing a Lucian, is this constant fear, this constant pressure of him just jumping into your lane and getting you killed. Every single time you walk up to a wave or trying to trade, there's always this little thought on your mind that this Lucian can just jump into your lane and kill you. And this is a problem that many people completely forget about, and why Lucian is getting so many kills. And also, while Lucian is such an annoying champion to deal with, it's not about the inherent champion strength or anything, it's just about the fact that he can just appear and get you killed. Next problem with this champion is that he falls under the category of those Yumu's Ghostblade champions, and those snowball very heavily, similar to, for example, Riven. Having this item allows them to basically skip out on boots early and have the bonus movement speed, the bonus damage, and are just able to continuously attack you without losing too much. Another thing that plays into this kind of theme of playing is the tribute thing in the jungle. Their tribute mechanic allows them to stack up gold and not farm too efficiently and still get gold. And if you think about the solo queue climate and how many people just die around the game for no reason, you'll quickly understand that they'll get a lot of gold for free because people completely underestimate the power of a Yomu's Ghostblade. Similar to example for an Aatrox player. Aatrox is not one of the most crazy champions, but the thing is, this champion always gets fed, and since he has 2 steroids on movement speed given Yomu's Ghostblade and his ultimate ability, he'll run down people, and if he gets fed, then problems happen. Similar, well, to Lucian. The next champion I will talk about comes for the support role, and here we have Karma. Yes, Karma is still an absolutely broken champion and really annoying to deal with, but there are a few things you need to know when it comes to Karma. Using your empowered first ability just right into the enemy's face level 1 is often not the right play, and here's why. The enemy most of the time runs bone plating. Bone plating will take the brunt of the damage from your spell, your ARI, and from the explosion afterwards. So before you use any spell and you have the possibility of doing so, take away the enemy bone plating and then use your spells. Using alt attacks or anything along those lines, having your ally proc it first, anything basically works, but don't use your spells into the bone plating and keep a mental note of the enemy's bone plating. Once you understand that, you'll have major advantages over the enemy. The next tip here is going to come in the form of Relic Shield. Don't go Sickle, go Relic. And here's another thing you can do with the Relic Shield. On the first wave, you don't last hit a minion with your Relic Shield passive. You basically keep it unless the enemy forces you to take minions. Then on the second wave, you use the Relic stack to get a faster level 2, then you can all in the enemy champion. On wave 3, which is the cannon wave, you keep your stack exclusively for the cannon minion. With the cannon minion dead, you can go for either a reset or even an all-in yet again. Once you've done this, you can go for a default reset towards mid lane, see if your mid laner needs a crash for his wave, for which you use the Relic Shield again, and otherwise, just go back to your lane. Use your Relic Shield with purpose, and then you have so much more impact as a support champion. The next champion on this list also falls in the category of the Youmuu's Ghostplay champions. It's Zed. This champion is similarly as broken as other champions of that kind and is very troublesome to deal with. He's super slippery compared to other champions, and he deals a lot of burst damage to squishy champions. Also, a thing that people most of the time forget, as the game goes on, his ultimate cooldown will go so low that he can basically just spam it for fun. Even if he gets any kind of thing out of it, like a flash, a Zhonya's, or literally anything, he can just use it again briefly after. And even without this, he still deals a lot of bonus damage, given the fact that his shadows are really dangerous things. Most of the time you can just use your ultimate ability, then use your shadow somewhere else and wait for the enemy to commit for a mistake. Then you can autocast every single ability of yours, especially once you have Serylda's, and it will most of the time just hit without any counterplay available. Then with the damage multiplier of your ultimate, the death mark, you'll see people just pop. Another meta thing people completely forget about when playing assassins is that you don't need to fully commit to a roam. A lot of times you can just sit in a brush and wait for something to happen. For example, enemy mid laner following you because they're afraid of getting flamed, which is actually a thing. People commit to making so many mistakes because they're afraid of allies flaming them. For example, bot laners want to go for dragon because, well, I don't know, and then the jungler goes for it even though it's an absolutely stupid call and they all die and they lose the game. But obviously they weren't flamed, so it's okay, right? No, it's really not. But given this idea, you can basically abuse the enemy's emotional state in the game and their likelihood of getting tilted if they get flamed for something to get an advantage on your own. In reality, all you have to do for this is walk towards a lane, sit in a bush towards that lane, wait for the enemy to walk towards you, and then punish them. You'll most of the time just instantly kill them if they choose to go for it, and you'll then be presented with the wave and platings for absolutely free. If that doesn't work out and they commit for the wave, you can wait for them to use cooldowns on that wave and then jump on them from the Fog of War. You can use this multiple times during a game and it will yield crazy results once you make it into your typical gameplay. Last but not least, we have to talk about Lucian as a priority pick. Lucian in the mid lane or Lucian as an AD carry both works absolutely fine, is a menace to deal with. And the primary reason for this is the combination of the rune Brutal and Kraken Slayer. These both runes give Lucian basically double the power during the laning phase and open up so many all-in situations which usually would never occur in the first place. For the AD carry role, there's one thing you have to know. Lucian can start with a second ability if he is able to run down the enemy in level 1. By using his second ability, he can take off the enemy's bone plating and grant himself bonus movement speed to hunt down people. For mid lane, it's usually always your first ability because you want to poke out the enemy and get wave control. All-inning level 1 usually doesn't happen that many times. As Lucian gains levels, his trading patterns become increasingly more toxic because of the things I've mentioned before, Brutal and Kraken Slayer. If he gets more passive spells, in the sense of using his spells into his passive ability, he can gain so much damage during the laning phase that his damage is literally doubled. And barely any other champion can deal with this kind of domination. And then you have the following problem. He can slow push away, for example in the mid lane, into the enemy tower while constantly harassing you. This on the other hand will open up the jungle's ability to dive you and take away your wave and get a plating. Another thing you have to mention here is that this mid lane priority can be used to invade your jungler or to take any kind of play on the other side of the map and then accelerate the game. This is 100% reproducible, you can do it every single game because most matchups cannot even fight back into you, and the only way you'll fail in that regard is that if you make mistakes. It's mostly linked to you, so there's not much that can happen to you. Unless the enemy team has a Lucian and they just level 2 gank you, and then you'll be in absolute agony. And that's it for today's video. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel and come back for more RiftGuides content. See you soon.